The Hudson River in New York carries many secrets, its waters deep and dark, swirling with the stories of countless lives. On certain nights, when the wind howls just right and the moon hides behind thick clouds, the river seems to whisper murmurs that speak of those lost to its cold embrace. Among those whispers are tales of a sinister force, something beyond mere accidents, something that has eluded law enforcement for decades. This force, whispered by conspiracy theorists and frightened locals alike, is known as the Smiley Face Killers. But before we dive into today's gripping story about the Smiley Face Killers, if you're a fan of true crime, mysterious cases, and eerie midnight tales, you're definitely in the right place. Tie up the like button if you're ready for today's story, and bury that subscribe button. And keep an eye out for a hidden clue in this video. Comment below if you spot it. You might just unlock a secret about next week's episode. It was a typical autumn night when Andrew Collins disappeared. A college student at a nearby university, Andrew had been out with friends at a bar, celebrating his recent acceptance into a prestigious internship program. The air was crisp, the city lights reflected off the river, and laughter filled the air as the group enjoyed their night out. But when the evening drew to a close, Andrew never made it home. The search for him began almost immediately. Friends, family, and police scoured the area, combing through surveillance footage and canvassing the streets. Days turned into weeks, and hope began to fade. Then, almost a month after his disappearance, Andrew's body was found in the river, several miles downstream. The medical examiner ruled his death an accidental drowning, attributing it to intoxication and the treacherous waters of the Hudson. The case was closed, but something about it didn't sit right with Andrew's parents. It wasn't just the fact that Andrew was a strong swimmer, or that he'd been found with very little alcohol in his system, far less than what would have caused him to lose his balance and fall into the river. No, it was something more sinister, something chilling. At the site where his body was discovered, spray painted on a nearby wall, was a simple yet disturbing symbol: a smiley face. Andrew's death wasn't the first, nor would it be the last. Over the years, a pattern began to emerge: young men, typically college students, disappearing after nights out, only to be found days or weeks later in bodies of water, often in rivers, lakes, or ponds. In nearly every case, a smiley face was found nearby, painted crudely in spray paint, taunting investigators with its simplicity and horror. The term Smiley Face Killers was coined by retired New York City detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, who noticed the eerie similarities in cases across the Midwest and Northeast. Despite the geographical spread, the victims shared commonalities: intelligent, athletic, and socially popular young men, often with bright futures ahead of them. The detectives' theory was controversial and met with skepticism by many in law enforcement. Most of the deaths had been ruled accidental drownings, with no signs of foul play. But Gannon and Duarte were convinced that these were no accidents. The smiley face, they argued, was the signature of a group of killers, possibly a cult, operating across state lines with a level of coordination and sophistication that made them nearly impossible to catch. The smiley face was more than just a signature. It was a mocking symbol, a way for the killers to communicate their superiority, their ability to strike without fear of being caught. Another victim was a 21-year-old student at the University of Minnesota, Christopher Jenkins, a bright and well-liked young man with a promising future ahead of him. On Halloween night in 2002, Christopher attended a party with friends, dressed in a Native American costume that made him stand out in the crowd. The night was filled with fun and laughter, but when the party ended, Christopher was nowhere to be found. His friends assumed he'd gone home with someone or decided to continue the night elsewhere, but when he didn't show up the next morning, panic set in. His family launched a massive search effort, distributing flyers, contacting the media, and pleading for information. For 4 agonizing months, they heard nothing, until Christopher's body was discovered in the Mississippi River, still dressed in his Halloween costume. The police initially ruled his death an accidental drowning, but his family refused to accept this explanation. They pointed to the fact that Christopher's body had been found with his arms crossed over his chest, an unusual position for a drowning victim. There were also signs of blunt force trauma on his head, inconsistent with a simple fall into the water. Then there was the smiley face. Near the spot where Christopher's body was pulled from the river, someone had painted a smiley face on a stone embankment. The symbol was eerily similar to those found at other scenes, leading Gannon and Duarte to suspect that Christopher was another victim of the Smiley Face Killers. Despite these suspicions, the case remains officially unsolved, with the true cause of Christopher's death still shrouded in mystery. In 2005, Todd Gieb was a 22-year-old from Casnovia, Michigan, a small town where everyone knew each other and life moved at a slower pace. Todd was a hard-working young man with a close-knit group of friends and a family who adored him. On the night of June 12th, he attended a party in a nearby orchard, a common gathering place for local youths looking to have some fun away from the watchful eyes of adults. As the night wore on, Todd decided to leave the party, telling friends he was heading home. He made a few phone calls on his way, the last of which was to a friend. His disappearance baffled the local community. Searches of the area turned up nothing, and the dense woods surrounding the orchard seemed to swallow all traces of him. It wasn't until 21 days later that Todd's body was found in a nearby lake, floating upright as if he had just walked into the water moments before. His body was in a remarkably preserved state, leading investigators to suspect that he hadn't been in the water for long, despite the time he'd been missing. The Smiley Face Killers didn't shy away from the Windy City either. On a frigid February night in 2007, Brian Gibbons, a vibrant college student, was discovered drowned in the icy depths of the Chicago River. Investigators remained cautious, attributing his death to heavy drinking and potential accidental drowning. Yet, the unsettling smiley face graffiti found near the scene only deepened the mystery. Brian's case, like many others in Chicago, remains unsolved, casting an eerie shadow over the city and its countless mysteries. As the number of cases linked to the Smiley Face Killers grew, so too did the fear and speculation surrounding the mystery. Some believed that the killers were a highly organized group, communicating through the dark web and targeting specific individuals for reasons unknown. Others suggested a more supernatural explanation, theorizing that the killers were driven by something beyond human understanding, something ancient and malevolent that used the smiley face as a symbol of its power. Theories abounded, but concrete evidence was elusive. The smiley faces themselves varied in style and execution. Some were small and hastily drawn, while others were large and meticulously crafted. They were found in different colors, sometimes accompanied by cryptic messages or symbols that only deepened the mystery. One such case occurred in La Crosse, Wisconsin, a city that had seen more than its share of mysterious drownings over the years. Between 1997 and 2006, at least 8 young men were found dead in the Mississippi River. Each case was ruled an accidental drowning, but the frequency and circumstances of the deaths led many to suspect foul play. In one of these cases, the body of 21-year-old Luke Homan was found after he had gone missing following a night out with friends. Like the others, his death was ruled accidental, but nearby, painted on a wall along the river, was a familiar and haunting sight: a smiley face. The La Crosse cases attracted significant media attention, with locals demanding answers and law enforcement struggling to dispel the growing fear. Yet, despite the public outcry and the mounting evidence of a pattern, the deaths continued, each one accompanied by the same unsettling symbol. As the Smiley Face Killers theory gained traction, it began to attract the attention of both independent investigators and the media. Some journalists and true crime enthusiasts took up the cause, digging into old cases and uncovering new ones that fit the pattern. The more they uncovered, the more it seemed that the killers were not just a random group of murderers, but part of a larger, more sinister conspiracy. Some pointed to the possibility of a cult, one that preyed on young men for reasons that remained unknown. The smiley face, they suggested, could be a symbol of initiation or a calling card left to mark each successful kill. Others speculated that the killings were part of a twisted game, with members of the group competing to see who could claim the most victims without being caught. There were even whispers of a connection to the occult, with some theorists suggesting that the smiley face was a symbol of a dark ritual, one that required the blood of the young and the innocent. The killers, they argued, were not just murderers, but followers of an ancient and malevolent force that demanded sacrifice in exchange for power or eternal life. These theories, while chilling, remained speculative. The true nature of the Smiley Face Killers, if they existed at all, was still shrouded in mystery. Law enforcement agencies, for the most part, continued to dismiss the theory, citing a lack of concrete evidence linking the deaths to a single group or individual. To them, the smiley faces were nothing more than a coincidence, a random act of vandalism that had taken on a life of its own in the minds of conspiracy theorists. But for the families of the victims, the theory offered a grim explanation for the deaths of their loved ones, a way to make sense of the senseless. And for Gannon, Duarte, and those who believed in the existence of the Smiley Face Killers, the quest for the truth became an obsession, driving them to continue searching for answers long after others had given up. The case of Dakota James, a 23-year-old graduate student from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, brought the Smiley Face Killers back into the national spotlight in 2017. Dakota was last seen on January 25th, after a night out with friends. He was captured on surveillance cameras in downtown Pittsburgh, walking alone. For 40 days, his family and friends searched for him, holding out hope that he would be found alive. When Dakota's body was finally discovered in the Ohio River, it was a devastating blow. The medical examiner ruled his death an accidental drowning, but once again, there were inconsistencies. Dakota's body showed signs of ligature marks on his neck, suggesting he may have been strangled before being placed in the water. The condition of his body also suggested he had not been in the water for the full 40 days he had been missing. And then, of course, there was the smiley face. Painted on a nearby bridge abutment, it was a familiar, mocking reminder that someone or something was out there, watching and killing with impunity. The discovery of Dakota's body reignited the debate over the Smiley Face Killers. Despite the official ruling, his family and supporters were convinced that he had been murdered. One of the most puzzling aspects of the Smiley Face Killers cases is the condition of the bodies when they are recovered. In many instances, the bodies appear too well preserved for the amount of time they were supposedly in the water, leading to speculation that the victims were held elsewhere and then placed in the water shortly before being discovered. For example, in the case of Todd Gieb, his body was found in a standing position with little decomposition, even though he had been missing for 21 days. This has raised questions about whether the bodies were stored in cold environments or placed in the water much later than the actual time of death. Critics argue that these inconsistencies suggest foul play, but they were often overlooked by investigators who ruled the deaths as accidental drownings. In several cases, bodies were also found with what appeared to be ligature marks, signs of blunt force trauma, or other injuries inconsistent with accidental drowning. For instance, in the case of Dakota James, some experts noted potential ligature marks around his neck, suggesting strangulation. Similarly, in other cases, there were reports of head injuries, broken bones, or bruises that might indicate foul play. However, these injuries were often attributed to post-mortem damage or accidents during the fall into the water. In many cases, gamma-hydroxybutyrate, GHB, a substance often linked to incapacitation, was found in the victims' bodies, but dismissed by investigators. In many cases, the victims were last seen on surveillance cameras before disappearing, but there are often gaps in the footage. For example, Dakota James was seen on surveillance cameras in downtown Pittsburgh shortly before his disappearance, but there was no footage of what happened to him afterward. Some theorists suggest that critical surveillance footage may have been missed, overlooked, or even deliberately erased, preventing investigators from understanding the full sequence of events leading to the victims' deaths. There have been reports of strange encounters or suspicious individuals near the scenes of some of the disappearances. For instance, some friends of the victims reported seeing or interacting with people who seemed out of place or behaving oddly in the hours before the disappearances. These reports, however, were often not followed up on thoroughly. In some cases, witnesses reported seeing individuals following or watching the victims, but these testimonies were either not pursued or were deemed inconclusive. The Smiley Face Killers theory has continued to evolve over the years, with various investigators, journalists, and internet sleuths proposing new theories and interpretations. One of the prevailing new theories is that the Smiley Face Killers could be a highly organized network or gang operating across multiple states. According to this theory, the group targets young men with specific characteristics: intelligent, athletic, and popular. The killings are carried out with precision, often leaving little evidence of foul play. The smiley face symbols are left as a taunt to law enforcement, signaling the killer's defiance and confidence in their ability to evade capture. Some proponents of this theory suggest that the killers communicate and coordinate their actions through encrypted online forums or the dark web, making them difficult to trace. The murders might be part of a twisted game or ritual where members of the group earn status or points for successfully completing their kills. Another theory gaining traction is that the Smiley Face Killers might be part of a cult. This theory posits that the killings are ritualistic in nature, with the smiley face acting as a symbol of the cult's beliefs or deities. The choice of victims could be tied to specific astrological or numerological patterns, with the drowning serving as offerings or sacrifices to a higher power. Some investigators have pointed to the consistency of the smiley face symbol and the specific targeting of young, healthy men as evidence of a ritualistic pattern. This theory also raises the possibility that the cult members are well placed in society, perhaps even holding positions of power, which would explain the lack of significant law enforcement breakthroughs in the case. While the original theory suggests multiple killers working in coordination, some investigators believe that the smiley face murders could be the work of one or a few serial killers who have been active over a long period. These killers might be leaving the smiley face as a signature, much like other infamous serial killers have done with their own symbols or trademarks. In this scenario, the smiley faces might vary in style because different killers are imitating the original murderer, or the same killer is intentionally varying the symbol to confuse investigators. The serial killer theory also suggests that the deaths could be spaced out in time and location to avoid detection, with the killer or killers potentially moving across the country to find new victims. A more outlandish theory is that the smiley face killers could be part of a psychological operation, or an elaborate hoax designed to manipulate public perception or sow fear. This theory posits that the killings, if they are murders at all, might be staged or fabricated to create a sense of mystery and terror, possibly for purposes of social control or distraction. Proponents of this theory point to the lack of definitive evidence tying the smiley faces to the deaths and the wide geographic spread of the cases as signs that the entire phenomenon might be a constructed narrative. According to this theory, the smiley faces could be a red herring, deliberately placed to mislead investigators and the public. For those inclined towards the paranormal, there is a theory that the smiley face killers could be something otherworldly. Some suggest that the killings could be the work of a malevolent spirit or entity that preys on young men, using water as its domain. The smiley face might be a manifestation of this entity, a symbol of its control over its victims, and the futility of human attempts to stop it. This theory also taps into urban legends and folklore about water spirits or demons that lure people to their deaths. The smiley face could be seen as a twisted form of humor or mockery from this entity, laughing at the human inability to comprehend or confront it. A more recent theory considers the possibility that the original smiley face killer's idea, whether based on true events or not, has inspired copycat killers. These individuals, aware of the notoriety of the theory, might be carrying out similar murders and leaving smiley faces to gain attention or to further confuse investigators. Copycat crimes are not uncommon, especially in cases that receive widespread media attention. This theory suggests that some of the more recent deaths attributed to the Smiley Face Killers could actually be the work of unrelated individuals who have adopted the symbolism for their own purposes. According to some theories, the similarities in these cases might be attributed to common risk factors associated with young men, such as alcohol consumption and proximity to water bodies in college towns, rather than the actions of a coordinated group of killers. The smiley faces found near some of these sites could simply be random graffiti in urban areas, rather than a deliberate signature left by a murderer. Despite these theories offering various explanations for the mysterious deaths, none have provided conclusive evidence to definitively solve the case. The truth behind the smiley faces and the drownings remains elusive, with the possibility that this mystery may never be fully resolved. Yet, the Smiley Face Killers theory continues to capture the imagination and fears of many, keeping the debate alive and the quest for answers ongoing. As of now, no suspects have been definitively identified or apprehended in connection with these deaths, and law enforcement agencies have not officially recognized them as connected murders. The truth still seems out of reach, concealed by the depths of the Ohio River, the Hudson, the Mississippi, and countless other rivers and lakes across the country. These waters hold their secrets tightly, hiding answers to questions that have plagued investigators for years. The deaths of dozens of young men remain officially as accidental drownings, despite the efforts of those who believe otherwise. The smiley faces, whether the work of a lone killer, a group, or perhaps something else entirely, continue to haunt those who have lost loved ones. The truth may never be known. Perhaps the killers, if they exist, have moved on, satisfied with their work, or maybe they are still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their next victim. The rivers continue to flow, their waters dark and murky, carrying the secrets of the past and the fears of the future. And on certain nights, when the wind howls and the moon hides behind thick clouds, the rivers seem to whisper the stories of those lost to their cold embrace, and of the smiley faces that mock the living from beyond the grave. In the shadows, the smiley face lingers, a symbol of a mystery that may never be solved, waiting to claim its next victim. If you've made it this far, you must have enjoyed today's story. So go ahead and strangle that like button, then slowly press subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on what's coming next. And remember, there was a hidden clue somewhere in this video. Did you find it? Comment below if you did. And maybe, just maybe, you'll get a special hint about our next dark and mysterious case. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious and stay safe.